Hello, I want to talk about my first Sliver deck, which is maybe the most different or interesting deck that I've built. Um, I guess let's familiarize ourselves with the first Sliver, and this one doesn't actually explain Cascade, so let's go over here and Cascade. When you cast this spell, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card that costs less. You can cast it without paying its mana cost. Put the exile cards in the bottom in a random order. So when you cast a card with Cascade, you're basically going to flip cards off the top of your deck until you find something that costs less, and then you get to cast that for free. Now notably, the first Sliver also says Sliver spells you cast have Cascade, which means people play it as a Sliver deck, because why wouldn't you? Over 18,000 decks, the 70th most popular commander, and people are playing Slivers. So this is a very popular commander with that many decks. But when you build it the way I'm building with your Eureka, suddenly you go from over 18,000 down to 34. Now what is Eureka? And also Hypergenesis. It'll probably be easier to read Hypergenesis first. So it does have Suspend, which also means it, in this case, has no mana value. But if you cascade into it, it will get cast. But the main point is that starting with you, each player may put an artifact, creature, enchantment, or land from their hand into play, and you repeat this process until no one puts a card into play. And Eureka, at least the only physical printing of the card, is hard to understand. So let's go over here and look at this handy digital version. Starting with you, each player may put a permanent card from their hand into play. Repeat this process until no one puts a card onto the battlefield. So they're essentially the same card. Now Hypergenesis does list specific card types, so you can't put, a Planeswalker into play, for example. But the main, outcome of either of these two spells is that you put something from your hand into play for free, any permanent, then one of your opponents does, the next opponent does, and you go round and around until everyone at the table is either out of things to put into play or no one wants to put anything back into play. And the reason these are so important in my deck is because they're the only cards that I can cascade into. So usually the game plan is get to 5 mana, cast my commander, and then cast one of these two cards. Now that means the rest of the cards in our deck have to cost more than this so we can reliably hit these. So if we look at the whole deck, we can see that we've got a bunch of big scary creatures. These are sort of my mana value, so they all start at 5 obviously, and then they get scarier and scarier as we go. And these are probably the least interesting part of the deck because there are so many big fat creatures all throughout Magic's history, and they don't just have to be creatures, they can be artifacts, enchantments, which I also have a couple of, but we can talk about those maybe later or near the end. The more interesting parts of the deck are ways that you can do things earlier or protect your very flimsy game plan. There are some ways that you can try to stop bad things from happening. So let's start with the lands. This is the only land that can help us out by making the next spell we cast uncounterable. So now we'd cast the first Sliver, and then when its cascade triggers on the stack, we would respond to it and use this ability to make our Hypergenesis or Eureka not be able to be countered once we hit it. I wish there was a way to tutor this onto the battlefield early. As far as I know, there's no such way. And remember, cards like Crop Rotation don't have a place in our deck. Even though we could run it, it just means that we're not guaranteeing that we're going to hit Hypergenesis or Eureka off of our commander, which is really the whole point of the deck. And when you talk about instants and sorceries, we will talk about some ways that we can play things earlier than expected. But back to the lands. There is this nice little cycle of 5. I wish it was a full 10 of them, but we only have these 5 from Invasion. I don't think they've ever been reprinted, and nobody plays them. Therefore, they're still not worth any money. But they do come into play tapped, and they tap for 1 color, or they can sacrifice themselves and add 2 colors. Now, what's nice about that is that means we might be able to cast our commander ahead of schedule, because we could maybe play this on turn 1, maybe play this on turn 2. Suddenly we've got white, black, green, blue, and then on turn 3, if we cast an untapped red source, we could cast our commander on turn 3. Or even just one of these enables us to do it on turn 4. Same deal with Krosan Verge, which not only fixes our mana if we need it, but it also ramps us. Additionally, we have the Triomes, which you might actually use the cycling ability, because there's going to be plenty of times where we've got 3 mana sitting around earlier in the game, in case we're flooded. Now, of course, this is a very pricey mana base, but you could just build a budget mana base. You would keep this little cycle of 5, and you would keep Krosan Verge, and you'd get rid of all the rest of these lands and put in, you know, the tri-lands that come into play tap. I mean, anything that you want, as long as you can hit all 5 colors by turn 5. So there is this little package here of instants and sorceries that are either ways to interact earlier in the game or protect ourselves. So let's just go in order here. We've got this split card. Now for the purposes of split cards, when you're doing Cascade or Discovery, you add both sides. So this has a mana value of 5, so we don't have to worry about cascading into it. And the left side, we'll never cast, hopefully. But on the right side, we could grab a multicolored card and put it into our hand. So we could help sculpt our hand by grabbing some big multicolored creature threat. And it doesn't have to be a creature. We could grab Rakshas's Bargain, which is just a nice little draw spell. There's a couple of draw spells, Rakshas's Bargain and Delightful Discovery. These can be cast for less than 5 mana and, you know, give us some extra fuel. Then we've got Devastating Mastery. This is the only, you know, sorcery or instant board wipe that I run. To me, this is the best one. It destroys all non-land permanents. So there are some other good options like Doomscar, but they only hit creatures. This hits everything, so it can really set the board back while we're waiting to build up to our 5 mana. And then we also have Gush, which is another form of card draw, but this one has a little bit of different timing. So this is a card that is well known in Vintage, or at least once upon a time it was known in Vintage, but in Commander it's virtually unknown. But we can return 2 islands to our hand rather than pay its mana cost and draw 2 cards. So we would cast our Commander, and then at any point before one of these resolves, we would cast this, put the 2 islands back into our hand, draw 2 cards so we can maybe draw some more big fatties. And what's great is we're actually generating mana by doing this. Now the mana probably won't matter because we're only going to have 2 mana, but we return the islands to our hand, and then one of these 2 will let us just put them right back into play, and they'll be untapped. So that's nice. A nice little way to get some free value. Also have Shared Summons, which is maybe the card I'm least sure of from this whole suite here. But it lets us grab 2 creatures with different names and put them into our hand. So we could delay casting our commander on turn 5 if we don't want to. Maybe we don't have enough fuel. And what's nice is it's instant speed, so we can do it right before our turn and grab some big threats. Because maybe people don't know what this deck does if they haven't seen it. And once you grab 2 creatures and you reveal cards that are not 2 little baby slivers, and you reveal, you know, something like this, they're going to be, the alarm bells are going to be off. But you do it at instant speed right before your turn, and they don't have much time to plan for what you're about to do on your next turn. And then finally, from this package, we've got Force of Will and Misdirection. Force of Will is very well known, and Misdirection is similar. We can exile a blue card rather than pay for it, and we can change the target of a spell. So the main point is that if we cast Eureka or Hypergenesis and someone's trying to stop it with a counterspell, we can stop that and protect our game plan. There are some other early forms of interaction. The only ones I'm choosing to run are Kogla and Yadaro. We can pay 4 mana and discard it and destroy an artifact or enchantment, shuffle it back in, and we draw a card. So it even replaces itself, which is very nice. Meringue River Regent is very similar to some of those card draw options. For 4 mana, we could draw some cards at instant speed to sculpt our hand, or just make our hand nice and juicy. Maybe we'll have like a 9-card hand by the time we untap and cast our commander, and then we can drop a bunch of stuff into play. Also have Angel of the Ruins, which can plain cycle, so we can go grab a land for a little shy. And notably, these all do have good enter the battlefield effects when they do come into play. They're not just here for their early game utility. Same with Trumpeting Carnosphere. We can pitch it to deal 3 damage to a creature. Ideally, you'd be playing this deck, at least this version of the deck, with all these scary threats at a high power level. You don't want to just sit down at like a mid-level table and drop these bombs on people and wreck them. You'd probably want to play at like the highest level right below CEDH. So people are going to be threatening to do stuff on turn 2, 3, 4 that you might want to stop. And when this guy comes into play, he discovers 5, so he could hit one of these 5 drops, but he also could hit Force of Will, for example. So he wouldn't be in the deck if he didn't have this nice discard ability. Also have Chancellor of the Annex, which is really good in the deck if it's in your opening hand. You can reveal it from your opening hand, and if you do, each opponent's first spell gets countered unless they pay 1 more mana. So maybe someone's really excited that they've got a Soul Ring in their opening hand, and you reveal this after everyone's got their hand, and suddenly they can't play Soul Ring on turn 1 because it'll get countered. And when it's turn 2 and they finally can cast their Soul Ring, they still have to pay an extra mana for it, otherwise it gets countered. So this can really slow people down, which is important because you're going to be doing not much for the first couple turns. And I think that's it for creature early game interaction, except for maybe the most important card in the deck other than our core package here, and that's Colossal Sky Turtle. So he's only a 6/5 flyer with Ward, so he's not very impressive, but he does have 2 crucial channel abilities, and channel could be done at instant speed. So we could pay 3 mana and discard it and return a card from our graveyard to our hand, which is very important because our Eureka or Hypergenesis might get counterspelled, and this can get it back, and then we can go off on the next turn. We wouldn't get back Hypergenesis because it has Suspend, so we would get back Eureka and then untap and cast Eureka. But it also has another ability. We could pay 2 mana and discard it to return a creature to its owner's hand. So like I was talking about with the Carnosaur, people are going to be threatening to do stuff early in the game, so we want to be able to interact with them if we can. So I believe that's everything that this version of the deck can do earlier in the game. There are many cards in this considering section down here. For example, there's a whole bunch of sorceries and instants that you could do and put in the deck. The problem with putting too many of these in is you don't want to water down your hand, because ultimately you want to cast your commander on turn 4 or 5 and then drop a bunch of stuff into play, and these will water down your hand the more that you have. But there's lots of strong options. I'll put a link to the deck in the video. And aside from these instants and sorceries, there's also many, many, many cards that are permanents, that are bigger than 4 mana, that have some way to do something for you before turn 5. For example, you got these MDFCs. Maybe this one doesn't count because it's a sorcery, but Pinnacle Monk, we could pay it for 5 mana, and we could put an instant sorcery back in our hand. So this could be like a backup plan to get back Eureka. But on the flip side, it is just a land. Evoke is very good. We could play this early game, get some cards. There's Solitude, which is a great way to, interact with the board early if people are threatening to go off. I mean, there's, I'm not going to go through every card here. There's 600 of them, and there's even more little niche searches you could do to find more. But there's all kinds of things you could search for to put in the deck. So the deck is very flexible, like I've been saying, with the land. You could play a budget land base. You could play a budget, set of fatties. I mean, a lot of the fatties in the deck, I guess we'll go over some of them now, like Soul of Emancipation, and this isn't worth any money, so this could probably be in any version of the deck, and it's quite good. It's kind of a similar card to Terrastodon. Comes into play, and you can destroy some sorts of permanents and give people some creatures in return. But I focused on building the deck to interact with what my opponents are going to do once I play Eureka, because they're going to be dropping lots of stuff into play too. So I want to be able to kill all their stuff or put it back in their hand. It's also nice to give your team haste. I have plenty of ways to give my team haste so that I can drop them all into play and go berserk right away. This is maybe the meanest card in the deck. At the beginning of each end step, each player discards their hand. So if your opponent's holding some kind of board wipe, or they're ready to go off on their turn with something on their hand, well, suddenly they're not going to have a hand at the end of your turn. Also have some other ways to stop people from casting instants and sorceries. Azor the Lawbringer. Also have Jin Gitaxias Progress Tyrant. Also have Magister Sphinx here to set someone's life total to 10. I mean, the world is your oyster. I mean, you could play some Eldrazi like we've got here. You could play World Spine Worm. I mean, you can do any kind of mean thing that you want. You could even make a theme deck. I mean, there's a million dragons in Magic that are big and fat. You could probably make a 5-color Sliver deck that's just a bunch of dragons and play some kind of dragon tribal game plan. There's also some artifacts and enchantments that I have here. I tried to limit these because I try to focus more on having creatures, because lots of these cards synergize with creatures. Lurking Predators, for example, Warstorm Surge, Ochroma's Memorial. These all synergize with having creatures, so you don't want to load the board, load your deck too much with non-creatures. But you could, I mean, you could theoretically just play a shell that just has Eureka in it. You could scrap Hypergenesis, and you could put a bunch of Planeswalkers into play. I mean, you could do all sorts of things. But I feel like I've kind of covered the main ideas. So let me know what you think.